I don't think there has ever been a better time to be entrepreneurial than today. Like most of the time, our challenges are that we don't have enough resources. It's not that we don't have enough ambition. It's not that we don't have enough vision. It's not that we don't have enough, like, frankly, good ideas that would be beneficial if they came to the world. Our limitation is generally resources, right? We don't have enough money. We don't have enough time. We don't have enough money to be able to afford people to give us a multiplier of time, right? Like it's all of that limiting factor. Now, more than any other time in human history, those limitations are reduced. Are they eliminated? No, they are not eliminated. This is still going to be competitive. This is still going to be hard. But you're going to spend so much less time on the crap that doesn't move the needle.
Geoff, welcome to Innovators Inside.
Great to be here.
Yeah, well, it's exciting to have you on the pod. It's exciting to meet you. We've got a serial entrepreneur who's got some big ideas around innovation in organizations and enterprises writ large that I'm pretty excited to learn about. What do you think? You ready to kind of dig in?
I'd love to, man. Let's go.
Amazing. So for folks that don't know you, really pleased to welcome Geoff McQueen, founder and CEO of WorkSights AI. Geoff, tell me a bit about your story. Tell me a bit about how you came to be sitting here, on a podcast, talking about innovation and what it means in the world.
Yeah, no, great to be here, man. So I'm a serial entrepreneur, which is another polite way of saying professionally unemployable. I've started 4 companies.
It's a compliment.
Now. Yeah, I'm okay with it. Started 4 companies now. And most recent one I exited, my third company, I exited a couple of years ago. It was a platform for managing all of the client work in a professional service business. And over the years, got the real pleasure and privilege to work with about 4,000 businesses, mostly SMBs, but including some really big names. And so got to understand sort of how they worked. Workflow was very central to the product, making sure they deliver great work for their clients on a profitable basis. It sounds boring, but frankly, it's kind of like where it's all at from a business point of view. It was great to be able to help so many companies to really, sort of streamline and systemize their operations in this critical but often back office stuff. And after exiting that company, it took a little bit of time and then decided to get back in the game because I'm a glutton for punishment. And I've started a new company called WorkSights AI, which is as the name suggests, an AI platform that is really a continuation in some respects of my professional life work, which has been to use technology because I'm very much a nerd and a geek and I love it, but using technology to help the people running businesses to be more successful and to create more successful and prosperous businesses. Because I believe that, being a father and, I've got 3 young kids now, I care more about the future than I probably did before that. And I just look at, what does future prosperity for our communities and our societies look like? And I think businesses and entrepreneurs play the critical role in creating that future prosperity. And so my sort of, focus is to create and apply technology to help those people that are already giving it their all to build and scale businesses. I want to help them to be more successful at doing it where possible.
And that's awesome. And I think it's a really good jumping off point for our conversation, right? Because as we record this, we can, reach our hand out to any random headline, pull it out of the ether, and more likely than not, it's going to be some question, scare story, aspirational sci-fi statement about what AI is doing in our lives. And let's be clear, like you're talking about helping people do their best work, but they're doing it in an environment that's actually changing around them pretty quickly. And in some cases, pretty fundamentally, where jobs that have had significant enterprise value for a number of years seem like they're on shaky ground. So, to get started, what do you see in the world that caused you to say, not just I want to jump back into entrepreneurship, but that this is the problem I want to tackle? What are the macro trends? What's the future you envision? Just kind of walk me through your process there.
Yeah. So when I was when I was getting back into it, I sort of looked at the AI for business landscape because that's my lens, right? And the first part of it was, I think of it like three legs of a stool, if you want to try and have that metaphor. And so the first leg of the stool, or the first phase, or whatever you want to call it, was really that using AI in a business or a workplace context as an individual. So, I was having to go through some legal agreements, as one does. And instead of sitting there with a 60-page agreement and wishing I drank coffee, instead I was able to load it up into ChatGPT and say, hey, I'm looking at this and this. Can you let me know what looks like market terms, where the edges are? And of course, it came back and did an amazing job.
This first leg of the things we're all familiar with, right?
Yeah.
Review the documents, produce the content, copy edit, you do the search, skim my email. Super important. But as you said, individually empowering.
Very individually empowering. And what I realized in a business context was that like 50 or 100 people getting that individual benefit is still transformative and really important. But in a sense, it's not the whole story. And so then you look at the next leg of the stool, and I think it's going to be an area where there's a lot of disruption, which is around workflow and agents, where you can effectively do like what farmers used to do. They used to get around with a plow and a bunch of oxen and, farm hands and plow a field. And now they sit there in a John Deere tractor that drives itself, and they produce 10 times more food than they ever did and don't break a sweat. And so there is an aspect of this next phase where parts of a workflow, whether it's help desk and support related or other things, where the AI can actually do an almost as good, if sometimes better job than a person can do. And that's agentic and workflow stuff, which is very much focused on doing particular tasks or particular functions. And so that's the second leg of the stool, this kind of workflow automation. And frankly, a lot of it is going to be labor replacing.
Yeah. So we have the individual empowerment, which, we feel like sometimes we fear is labor replacing, sometimes not. But really, there's just tools that we have in our tool belt now. We have the workflow, which, yes, can be absolutely labor replacing, free people up to do else. What's the third leg of the stool?
So the third leg of the stool is it's the one that is the least defined, in my opinion. And that is, instead of treating the business as just a collection of individuals using this stuff or a series of disparate workflows that are just, doing their thing. Instead, it's actually looking at the business and AI empowering the business as the customer, or as the user, or as the entity of focus. Because if you think about something like OpenClaw, rolling out, 100 OpenClaw instances, one for each employee that connects to each of their own OAuth kind of integrations, doesn't really give the business OpenClaw. It doesn't give the business that AI system. You really need to flip it on its head and focus on the system.
Yeah, it's still that individual pillar.
Yeah. And so this third leg of the stool is what I'm focusing on with WorkSights AI, which is where all of the data, all of the context, all of the agents, all of the insights are focused on the business as a whole. And then the leaders and the individuals in that business get to be beneficiaries of that kind of holistic view. But it's focused initially on the sort of the company as the core, or the center of it. So it's kind of like the brain for a business that is AI enabled, as opposed to each of us having our own little exoskeleton individually, or the workflow going a bit faster.
So this is cool. I mean, on one hand, I am incredibly intellectually engaged and intrigued, right? This is such a neat concept. On the other hand, it's a little tough for me to wrap my head around what it means to think of an entity or organization as a customer user. But one thought occurs to me, right? I'm always fascinated by how much knowledge exists at the intersection of human conversation within an organization, right? It's never captured in a data set, but it kind of exists as people have a meeting and discuss. I mean, is that what we're talking about? What are we talking about here?
It's a little bit of that. But actually, funnily enough, it's initially about AI enabling and learning from and creating memory from the things that are already digital, but are frankly ignored unless the organization gets hacked. So every cloud platform of significance has these things called audit logs, or other forms of information that basically can tell you what's going on with documents or calendar events or CRM updates, like you name it, anything that gets touched creates this like Hansel and Gretel breadcrumb thing, right? And right now, all of that information lives in every cloud product of significance, and no one does anything with it unless they get hacked, and then the security guys use that information to try and work out what the bad guys got too. And so what I'm doing with WorkSights AI is effectively liberating that information to make it useful to line managers and executives, because knowing what's going on in a business is a big part of what makes leaders effective. I mean, if you don't know what's happening, it's really hard to make good decisions. And today, because there's so much information, we've basically had to create these other ways as humans, because we're still running an operating system, i.e. our mental bandwidth is still much unchanged from when we came down from the trees, right? And so our ability to go at the speed and with the bandwidth of all of this information that's going on in a company with 50 or 100 employees, that's, like everyone's busy, you just can't keep hold of it. So instead, what you end up doing is you take all that qualitative insight that happens when each individual person is part of doing their work, and you end up distilling it down into a couple of KPIs, and you use dashboards to try and understand what's going on. And then when the dashboard isn't quite, like something's not right on the dashboard, the first thing you do is call a meeting, because you know that the dashboard is just like a poor imitation of reality. The reality is in the qualitative information. So then you have a meeting to understand from different people who've got insights and knowledge what that qualitative story is. And it turns out that if you take that information that's already coursing through every business today in its digital fashion, not even having to like try and get to that kind of just conversations in a hallway stuff, which is great, but also really hard. Instead, you can use the stuff that's already there and then AI enable that. So imagine you had enough time in the day to see what was going on, the clients that were getting the most amount of attention, things that were going sideways, things that were going well. Like imagine hypothetically you had that time.
But it's a dream. As a leader, it's a dream. But I feel this pain. Like the organization I lead isn't even all that large, but there's orders of magnitude more complexity and activity than I could ever have insight on. So that the promise is a bit of a dream, but I have kind of some interesting questions around here. I'm gonna come back to the whole AI on behalf of the business itself as an entity in a second. There's a whole rabbit hole I'm going to go down. I'm going to start with this one. Does the business have to be functioning well, or do you presume that? Tell me about that, because what I hear is like, okay, we make kind of an analysis in a digital twin, and that becomes the brain, but that assumes that whatever is actually happening is the right thing to be happening in the business.
So the short answer is no. And this is where, give my fellow technologists a hard time. I think this is one thing that does drive me mad, is we think, okay, technology can help. And therefore we extend it and think that technology has to do all of the solution, that technology is the answer to everything. And it's like, not really. So the technology can help to improve that visibility and create those insights for the humans who are the creative, who are the problem solving, who have the social capital amongst the organization or with partners outside the organization. Like the people aren't the problem. The problem is that the amount of information and the speed that the business is moving, and this is only getting worse with whether it's, you call it AI slop or whatever, it is our wet matter hasn't been able to keep up with this from before the days of email. And so the objective that I'm seeing here with AI enabling the company is what you do is you effectively start to give the leaders and the managers and the people doing the work that insight and visibility as a tool that helps them to actually keep up for the first time. Instead of it being an arms race where first there was email and then there was Slack and now there's all the AI slot, and we're constantly limited from a capability point of view as leaders to have visibility and understanding as what's going on. Instead, we're actually, for the first time, AI can actually understand this torrent of information and can distill it and do the hard work of reading that none of us have the time to do, and then can give us insights and be helpful to us. And so what I've been seeing in the product and in reality with the data that we're now working across, dozens of beta accounts and, 10 million records, what's really interesting is you get the AI to read all this stuff, and then you tell it with skills what you want it to do. So you give it a persona and you tell it what you're aiming for. And then as it reads it, it goes, here's something that's a little bit off to the side that I should probably bring to the attention of my executive or my leader or my master. And then it basically sends you that information distilled. And when you want to go back and check the receipts, you can. It's not hallucination land, but you're not having to do all of the initial kind of discovery. So the AI can do all of that for you. And that is the unlock. That's the mental unlock.
I mean, you got your little birdies out there. You got, your Westerosi spy network, but also directed insight. And like, you kind of headed off my next question, which is, hey, if you're creating something on behalf of the organization, if this third pillar of AI is really organizational, who's actually the customer, right? Because I think right now you're framing it as well as the leaders, the managers, the people that steer the organization. But to that end, I love the idea as a leader that I can have more directed insight into activities, what's going well. I can send out an agent to sort of ask and answer questions, right? This is extraordinarily appealing, and I want everything that you just described. I also have some really big questions around what this implies for how we need to change as managers and as leaders, right? Because this isn't just a tool on the tool belt. This feels like a very different way of running a company might emerge.
Yeah, I think you're right. And so I'm an NBA fan, and I spent years living in the Bay Area and watching Steph and Clay and particularly watching Steve Kerr, the coach, really actively coaching that team. And all coaches do, but there was something I think special about, watching him on the bench, just, really being a part of it. And I think about what it's like to lead a company or to be a manager, even if it's just a team of 2 or 3 people. And imagine that those NBA coaches, instead of standing there on the sideline and watching every play and really being involved, but not on the court physically, imagine instead Steve Kerr was sitting in the locker room, staring at the box score on his phone. And then the whistle goes for a timeout, and he runs out to the court and he sits in the huddle and he goes around and he goes, Draymond, I noticed you got 2 turnovers, because he's seeing it on his little dashboard, right? And Steph, I can see you're a bit cold beyond the arc, and should we maybe get the ball a little bit more into Clay's hands because he's running a bit hotter today? Your team would look at you like, what business have you got being a coach? Why would I listen to you? You're not part of this. Like, you're sitting there looking at a freaking box score, not watching the game. And I feel so like frustrated for great managers who want to be great coaches and developers of their team and their talent, but they're sitting there, unfortunately, particularly in a distributed and remote world, where they're stuck looking at dashboards like the box score in the locker room instead of actually being part of it with their team. And so the idea of this technology being able to finally catch up the speed our wet matter can work at with the speed that the business is running at, so that we can then sit in a conversation and already know what's been happening. So then we can be a coach, we can be a problem solver, and we can be a leader. Whereas most managers today spend most of their time in meetings, and God, hate the meetings. And yet what are they doing in that meeting? They're communicating either up or down, and they're coordinating. And it's just incredibly frustrating that they go into these meetings with their team each week and go, hey, what's the latest? Let's go around the table. It's just stupid. And so if we can unlock that human dimension, this is a thing that drives me mad about some of the AI stuff. Yes, there is going to be some aspects where it's like labor replacement, with tokens, and that's going to be really hard. I get it. But I still feel like at the end of the day, we are a society and we are groups of people that work together to solve problems and create things and help our customers. And if we can unlock those things that make us valuable, special, creative, and frankly feel alive in our jobs instead of just moving TPS reports around, then that feels like something that's really compelling.
I'm bought in to your story. You're painting a optimistic, humanistic picture, right, of how AI can support change in organizations. And like, it is compelling. It's not just the lovely green background you've got. It's sort of lulling me into a sense of optimism here. But let me play devil's advocate a bit, right? You are fundamentally painting a picture where that requires significant organizational behavior change. That requires people to do the very hardest thing for any human to do, which is change patterns, change behaviors, and think in a different way. Like we may all want to be, player coach type managers, but many of us haven't grown up in that environment. To talk to you a bit about what adoption looks like, what change looks like, and what you see as the stumbling blocks and accelerants there, because it has to be more complicated than just saying, hey, I'm going to swipe my credit card with WorkSights AI.
You make a good point, and it's something I've obsessed a lot about. So my last company, we changed the system of record for how you manage all your clients, your projects, your timesheets, and your billing. Talk about open heart surgery, right? Like transplant, massive change management. And so I definitely know that feeling, and I've been through that now, as I said, at the top thousands of times. The exciting thing about this stuff is it doesn't require anywhere near that much brain damage. So from a technical point of view, nobody has to change what they do. You keep using the tools you're already using. You keep working the way you've been working. And the AI is able to understand that without you needing to update the thing even once. So that's really important. Like there is almost no change management on the techie side. On the human side, the other good news is we're already doing the things that we should be doing, and this just helps you to do them better. So to give you an example, every manager worth their salt should be having a one-on-one in the calendar on a recurring basis with each of their direct reports.
You would think. Although I think Jensen might disagree with you at NVIDIA.
Well, Jensen has he's earned the right to change the rules.
Yeah.
But if you're
with you.
Yeah. Let's say you're not Jensen. You're not running a few $1 trillion company, and you have a bunch of people that report to you that you want to make sure that they're aligned, that any issues that come up can be addressed when they're small, get them as molehills, not mountains, those sorts of things, right? So you go into these conversations, and unfortunately for a lot of managers, it starts off as being like, hey, so, give me an update on what you've been working on and how things are going. And right. Again, instead, what I've seen with WorkSights AI is you type into it, and I do a bunch of work with one of my team members, Olga. And I'm like, hey, can you just give me a summary of what Olga's been working on the last couple of weeks? And if I wanted to, I could ask it to give it to me in the lyrics of a country western song, which I've done just for giggles. And because it already knows from like an overall system point of view, again, nothing is installed on anyone's computers. There's no like change of behavior. It's just using that security log stuff that everyone already has. And it's amazing. It's able to be like, okay, this is what's been happening. And so then when you go into that conversation, you're not like the NBA coach who runs into the huddle at a timeout from the locker room. You're actually there going, notice you've been working on this, this, and this. That sounds really good. Is there anything that's holding you up or blocking you? Or it looks like this is actually looks like this has, been a really big project. And, what can I do to help unblock you? Those sorts of things. So again, we've already got the techniques and the tools. We've just been effectively in such a massive deficit because of our wet matters operating speed that we've had to just basically suck at it. And so I don't think there's a huge amount of change. I think all of us know as managers, like it's a classic golden rule. Do what others do unto you. You can be like, hey, Billy, you've been working on such and such. How can I help? It's not that hard.
I have to admit, I'm usually such a glass half full optimist. I have to admit, I'm perpetually skeptical when it comes to, asking people to think about doing their jobs in a different way, even when they want to, right? But that's a longitudinal, that's a time problem. Like it will inevitably shift if the world's going that direction. But let me ask you this. You talked about your 3 pillars. I actually love this 3-pillar framework: the individual, augmentation, the workflows, and then the organizational stuff. You talked about the 3rd pillar, the one you're operating in, as being the most amorphous. But what do you think about it from an adoption timeline perspective? Like, is this where organizations are going to go first, or are they going to lean into the workflows and the agentic, support system, things like that? And why?
So the first pillar, where it's an individual experience, is already well underway. So I feel like on a timescale, that's done. It's not done, but it's underway, right?
It's just beginning, but I take the point. Yeah. Like, this is what people are doing today. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the agents there's going to be a lot of frustrations, disappointments, and false dawns. I think the agent piece is probably the furthest kind of on that crazy list of whether it's the Gartner's hype cycle or hype curve or whatever they call it. But that thing where it's like, everyone thinks they're going to have flying cars like in the next week, and then it turns
right. And then you fall into the trough of disillusionment and, hope to crawl out again. But it's too late for you. You're already in the hole. Yeah.
Yeah. So I can see tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars being dropped on agentic workflow rollouts. And there's going to be a lot of missteps and a lot of things that don't work, but that's the nature of experimentation and discovery. It's just that I think that area is going to be an area that's going to be really uncomfortable, because when the underlying economic thesis is we have less humans that we have to employ, and that affects a lot of people. And so when those initiatives go sideways, there's going to be so many pitchforks ready to go, because people have rightly, got an axe to grind. Too many tools at the tool shed there. But anyway, you know what I mean? Like that's going to be the area where there's going to be a lot of investment, a lot of hope, and just a bunch of drama. And I still feel like that's going to be a massive unlock for productivity and performance. But it's going to be something that's going to play out with a lot more, I guess, drama. And it's going to take longer, I think, to actually get its act together. The third leg of the stool is the most amorphous, because it doesn't really have, I think, a lot of a framework that we can lean on mentally, right? Like ChatGPT was a better Google. Like people could kind of get that. And then as they used it more, they realized, actually, this is a lot more than that. But they at least had a mental framing that they could grok. Like, I'll type things into a box and it gives me an answer. The workflow piece, I think also you can grok it, because you can just look at like people do X, they resolve tickets to Y, whatever it is. You can then just imagine that you've got a machine that can answer those questions instantly. This third one is more amorphous, because the idea that you could actually have technology that means that instead of being limited to the 60 degrees of what you're looking at right in front of you, you've got technology that can be watching the other 300 and then bring to your attention or give you visibility so that you can make better decisions. Probably the metaphor is like what it was probably like for Air Force pilots when they didn't have radar or AWACS and they were just limited to what they could see. And now one of the most important jobs in the US Air Force is this, controller who effectively tells the F-22 pilots where to go. And those pilots fight to get a particular person as their person, because their visibility is unparalleled compared to any particular operator, any particular pilot. And so I feel like that metaphor, that mental framing in business, we just haven't had it. It hasn't been possible. And every technology change that has occurred has made it harder and harder to imagine, because the amount of stuff going on has continued to grow exponentially, and yet our wet matter has not changed. And so I think what's going to be interesting is as folks like, and literally turning it on as a 3-click process, like you do the OAuth grant and the systems comes to life because the data's already there. And then you start to like, oh, this is new, this is different, but we don't have a good mental framing for it. So it's, I don't know, I describe it sometimes as like, an army of McKinsey interns costing you a few bucks a day that can basically just, do all of this grunt work.
Well, I love that. But I mean, look, like, the mythology of the executive command center, like that's not new, whether it's the Star Trek Bridge or any sci-fi that has, scrolling screens and interesting things, like whether it's Power BI, right? The dashboard wave of 15 years ago, like the mythology there is not new. What I think I'm hearing is that technology has perhaps started to catch up to the situations created by technology, and not just computers, but like telecommunications or anything, in terms of its ability to help the human understand. And that's actually really interesting because this is executive empowerment. You call it organizational empowerment, you can call it executive empowerment, and there's a million names that you're better at. But this is actually really interesting because what you're really talking about is helping the decision maker make incredible decisions. And that is fascinating. I mean, I want this. I desperately want this.
And most people making decisions are making, 100 a day. And most of them are small and not particularly consequential. And I guess the sense that I had going into this process was, whether it's the Power BI wave or the dashboard wave that you talked about from a decade or 15 years ago, the thing that's interesting is that those were all quantitative insights. They're all numbers, right?
Yeah. They are. They're all numbers.
Most of what goes on in a company that moves the needle is not a number. The number is the outcome sometimes, and you can game the numbers. And as soon as you see a number that's wrong on a dashboard, what's the first thing you do? You go from the quant and you go and look for the qual. You go for the qualitative. Why did this happen? Who do I talk to? How can I understand this? You're doing it by being qualitative again, because quant is just a facsimile of reality as best as you can construct it.
Well, not just qualitative, but narrative. I literally wrote an email the other day, like said, like, I need the narrative explanation of what happened here. I completely understand it. So, I think I'm bought, like I said a couple of times, I'm bought into the vision. This is really cool. I don't know how it plays out. But let me ask you this. What are some of the skills? What are some of the attributes, the capabilities that start to matter more in a world where we have this organizational level intelligence operating on our behalf? Does that change how we think about who's going to succeed in the world? I'm a parent. I want to know what to teach my kids.
Yeah. I think it does. So I've got this sort of, I guess, thesis that managers, particularly in like, sort of knowledge workery type environments that we're familiar with, have really had a tough time of it over the past decade or so, especially in the pandemic. And I think those managers, unfortunately, are really doing it tough in part because their role has become attend meetings to be a communicator and a coordinator. And that's really frustrating when you would rather be a problem solver and a coach and a leader and an empowerer. And I think what this kind of third leg of the stool changes is it changes the communication from being factual to being motivating and truly engaging, and it reduces the communications needs significantly. And I also think because you're not having to do the whole like catch me up to speed with what's going on qualitatively, because it's there, right? And the system will tell you proactively as well when there's stuff, not just did everyone read the compulsory reading before the meeting type stuff, but actually like, no, it tells you every day what's going on. So I think what that will do is it will empower individuals in the business that are more entrepreneurial as leaders, and it will threaten, frankly, people who are solely managerial as leaders. And I think my sense of what's going to transition over the next decade or so is the companies that have that entrepreneurial, not everyone will be, but the ones that encourage the entrepreneurial managers and leaders will be the ones that come out the other side of this in great shape. And the ones that are rigid and obsessed about how many people do I have in my org and have their fight once a year for budget, and it's a really big knockdown, drag out experience, I think those guys are going to get massively disrupted, because the ability to execute so much more quickly with the kind of phase 1 and phase 2, or the stool leg 1, stool leg 2 stuff, and then empowered by stool leg 3, is going to mean that you can basically have a new incumbent come up and really completely disrupt your org while you sit there fighting about budget.
And I think the sobering reality is that's the bloodbath we're going to see, right? I mean, if history has taught us anything, it's that an enormous number of companies walk off the cliff eyes wide open, and leaders and individuals will realize this even while being unable to present it. But it is interesting, because I think you're painting a vision where maybe it's not just about like the incumbents failing and like, that's fine, getting new emerging organizations, replacing them. It's about it's creative destruction, right? But it's the pace. Like, the pace might increase, the opportunity to disrupt an incumbent might increase. You might really actually just be talking about, this is the thing that gives that entrepreneurial mindset the leverage and the superpowers they need to achieve their vision faster, which is a very interesting way to think about this.
Yeah, that's what I predict. And I actually think it's less of will the incumbents do a Kodak or a Xerox and, screw it up despite themselves. I know that's probably going to happen a bunch, but I also think that there's a bunch of incumbents from a cultural point of view that can effectively have this entrepreneurial transition if the leadership wants it to have it, where they can basically, one of the talks I give is called the manager extinction. I mean, it's like the managers, the people who have got manager in the title right now aren't going to go extinct, but they're going to need to transition to become entrepreneurs and leaders, because the act of managing is not a great use of their time and their life.
But that's I think we just like, we talked about this a bit before the show, but I've been a line manager. We've all been there. It's an awful job in many, many ways. I'll just repeat that to whoever wants to hear it. It sucks. Like, I feel so much pain for them, but empowerment leads to risk and uncertainty. Risk and uncertainty are the antithesis of how a lot of efficient organizations work. And so, you are effectively, in my mind, making the claim that the successful organizations are the ones who are finally going to listen to the words that have been said for many, many years and say, you actually have to embrace risk. You actually have to embrace internal creative destruction. And that's not new. I mean, Clinton Christensen's been talking about this for decades. So in the new books he published. So but maybe it's now becoming more real.
I think that's the likely reality, because someone could sit there and say all of these right things, but then behave differently.
Which is what happens. This is exactly what happens. This is corporate innovation.
Yeah, and if they get their 5 or 10% top line number that they set out in their QBR, that's all in a steady state environment. Then they could say all these things, not do any of these things. What's the worst that's going to happen? Well, if you're Blockbuster and you joke about the Albanian army, well, that wasn't Blockbuster, it was cable TV, joking about Netflix. Sometimes you're going to get crushed. But that wasn't super frequent. So,
and it's slow. We forget how long it took. It did take a long time.
It did take a really long time. Whereas now, the ability to execute faster and do a lot more is like nothing we've ever seen before. WorkSights AI as a product, I've been able to build that with a small team for about 1/100th the cost in time and time duration and dollars of time, like headcount, than it would have cost to have done in my last company. And I've got that A/B test really close by in time series.
I mean, that's wild, right? Because we're separated by a single digit number of years here. We're not, that's pretty wild.
And that's just one example, man. Like if you think about any other industries, like no one should feel particularly comfortable right
now. They don't. I've talked to a lot of people and no one does, including me.
But that discomfort is what creates the opportunity, right? Like, that's the other side of the same coin.
It's the friction that leads to the pearl and the oyster and all that. I do fundamentally believe that. I love this three pillars of the stool framework way and 3 legs of the stool. And I think this is a fascinating discussion, partly because I think you're painting a high likelihood vision of the future of organization. So I want to direct you to the last little segment of the podcast toward the other entrepreneurs in the world, right? So I know you mentor dozens or hundreds of entrepreneurs. You've been a serial entrepreneur yourself. And you're talking about the importance of the entrepreneurial mindset, even in incumbent organizations. Looking at your experience, looking at the folks you're talking to, what's the advice that you are giving to the people that want to build and drive change? Like, what are you telling them? How are they going to operate in this world that's coming?
I don't think there has ever been a better time to be entrepreneurial than today. Like most of the time, our challenges are that we don't have enough resources. It's not that we don't have enough ambition. It's not that we don't have enough vision. It's not that we don't have enough, frankly, good ideas that would be beneficial if they came into the world. Our limitation is generally resources, right? We don't have enough money. We don't have enough time. We don't have enough money to be able to afford people to give us a multiplier of time, right? Like it's all of that limiting factor. Now, more than any other time in human history, those limitations are reduced. Are they eliminated? No, they are not eliminated. This is still going to be competitive. This is still going to be hard. But you're going to spend so much less time on the crap that doesn't move the needle. Like just imagine you're signing a lease. I know how much time I had to spend getting a lease signed in my last office in San Francisco. I would spend 5% of that amount of time, 95% reduction because of AI. And you just extrapolate that across everything, right? This is insane.
Well, and I love that. And I love this because you're coming at this from an abundance mindset, right? You're coming at this from the entrepreneurial mindset has all the tools in the world and with their compounding, which I think is really true. Is there a downside? Is there a cautionary tale that you sort of talk to entrepreneurs about?
A little bit. I think because I'm mostly working with tech entrepreneurs, I think one of the things that I've seen a little bit is because the AI is so good at giving you something that looks great very quickly and easily, and vibe coding is a good example of this, you can very easily get yourself into some serious trouble because you don't actually understand what's in the scaffolding and you don't understand all the foundations, what's underneath it. So I think there is a need to be very thoughtful about where the most important things are and how they're hanging together and understanding them. There's really not a shortcut for understanding. Like even a lease agreement, it might be a good shortcut to not have to plow through 40 pages of boilerplate, but you really do need to understand what happens if this, what happens if that, what happens if this. You need to ask those questions and you need to know them as human intelligence so that you can stand confidently with your feet planted on the ground and know which way you're going to move next. So I think there's a potential risk about a sort of over-reliance on, assumptions that everything's fine just because you haven't seen the disaster yet. So that's one thing. And I think the other thing is the kind of superpowers that you can harness, your competitors can harness too. And the thing is that the market that you're hoping to serve and help is actually harder to reach than it's ever been before.
Because of the noise in the system?
No, well, yes, but so the Facebook and Google duopoly have made it incredibly hard for you to reach your market. They just have. They've starched out all the value that should have been broken up years ago, but that's not going to happen now. So that's unfortunate. It's just the way it is, right? So this is not the grand days of the mid 2000s where we had Web 2.0 and like you could have direct access to the customer because they could put in a search and find you. Search traffic and click-through rates are down through the floor. It's just it's miserable, right? And so that's miserable, which means you've got to work harder to get those initial customers and do much more of what they talked about in Crossing the Chasm, where you build a tight ideal customer profile and get traction and word of mouth, and you effectively earn your place as the winner. So that's harder, and then you add to that the fact that the costs of starting and the ability to actually ship and create something are so much lower than they used to be, that not only is the ability to get through that doorway to the customer harder and smaller doorway or more expensive, or whatever metaphor you want to use, you've got 10 times more people trying to get through the same door. So entrepreneurially, this is the best time, but it's still not a cakewalk. This is still going to be hard work, because that go-to-market and engaging the market is still, frankly, a big challenge, and it's not getting any easier.
Well, I actually think that's a really interesting note, because there are things that are enduring about work and the human condition. I mean, not to, kind of wax too philosophical, but it is true. Like, there are no shortcuts. And, friend of the pod, Vivian Ming, came on a while ago. He's a super professor, and talked about, the atrophy of intelligence when we look for shortcuts. And the interesting thing is, I think what you're pointing out is that, these things may look like shortcuts. It might look like a shortcut for me as a manager to understand what's going on in my organization. But if I treat it as such, it might feel good. But if I treat it as like, these are tools that help me make the right decisions as a human, that help me analyze the right things, ask the right questions, do the right work, whatever, they're amplifiers. So I think that's a good gotcha, because we live in a world that feels magical right now. It does feel like people can do things, but tech can do things on their behalf. And that feels very dangerous to me. Like, doing our work for us is dangerous. Helping us do our work better feels right.
And I think you're right that it is about helping us. It's not about, there are things that are going to replace certain roles, no doubt. And that's going to be really hard, especially because the kinds of roles they're replacing are the roles that people watched their uncle or, someone living in the Rust Belt and went, oh, geez, they should have gone to college and, they'd be okay. And it's like, yeah, that was true in the 70s and 80s. In the start of the 70s, America's graduate college rate was 10%. In the last year, number of people with college degrees is well up over a third. It's a big transition.
It's not the differentiator anymore, and it's a different generation. I think that's really interesting. Well, Geoff, we could go all kinds of directions, but we're running out of time. I mean, what you're building is fascinating, and I appreciate you sharing the thought process for the environment in which you're operating. For our listeners that want to follow along, besides maybe just heading to Workforce's website, where should they go? Are you on LinkedIn? Do they head to the website? Where's the best way to see what you're doing?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Geoff McQueen, spelled Geoff, the kind of Aussie/English way. So Geoff McQueen on LinkedIn. I've got a blog as well that you might find. And then if you want to check out WorkSights AI, we're in beta right now. So anyone who wishes they could get better visibility into their business, go to WorkSights, spelled SIGHTS. It's vision, not location. So worksights.ai.
And we'll have all that linked in the show notes. I'm not just saying this for posterity. My team's going to be going to worksights.ai. We're going to check it out. Geoff, really appreciate you coming on Innovators Inside, sharing what you're working on. This is really cool, and we truly are living in a pretty fast-changing world.
We are. It's exciting, and thanks for all the work you do with your team and helping so many startups to get past that incredibly exciting and fledgling early phase.
Cheers. Have a good one.
All right. Thanks a lot. See you later. Bye.